Ahmad. Saturday, August 31st. This is the last day of August. Can imagine it's a beautiful day outside. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about how Kamala, I think that's how you say Kama and Law. This Kamala, they taught us in their convention. Kamala is really dancing around the issue of the genocide that Israel has been carrying on for almost a year now with the help of the Americans military, 50,000 tons of bombing been delivered to the Zionist state. And she comes and try to be cute and working on ceasefire with Biden and everybody cheering Biden's in the convention. The party is over. The circus tent is folded and the camera is gone away. But the reality is, this time, the Democrats, they're not going to scare us. They say, you don't vote for me, Trump is going to win. We don't care if he wins or not. We're not going to vote for somebody who is supporting genocide and still is and still supporting Israel and still make it clear and telling everybody that she is going to support Israel and she's going to send them a weapon and make sure they are capable of uh, committing more genocide against their neighbors and that crap about Israel has the right to defend itself. Everybody has the right to defend itself, but not the occupier, not the apartheid. Uh, an occupier forces by international law does not have the right to attack resistance or to claim victims when there is a resistance. So this is really bizarre things, and regardless of how the media spin it and try to kind of frame this genocide as a war between Israel, the democratic Israel, and Hamas. It's not really a war between Israel and Hamas. It's a war of ethnic cleansing been going on since 48. So it's not so much the Israelis have the right to defend themselves, but the fact so every time I come and talk about this shit, I cough. It is a fact that Palestinians have the right to resist. In the Western logic and the Western mind and the Western superior racist mentality, they cannot wrap their head around this fact. Reality is people will resist occupation and exploitation and happened in Vietnam's and Afghanistan's and Iraq, Syria, everywhere. Uh, Professor David Schultz, Professor of Political Science at Hamlin University. Welcome. Hello, Professor Schultz.
How are you today?
I don't know about that. I start taking the fifths.
All right, all right,
About, if you're not angry, you're not paying attention. So that's how I go by.
all right. One of my friends used to say, if you couldn't put people in power in an uncomfortable position once in a while, then life's not worth living.
That's not a democracy. We have to speak truth to power. But anyway, this is all bullshit. Truth to power, democracy, institution. Now, let's talk about the Democratic National Party. I mean, the circus is over. They folded the big tent from the United whatever in Chicago.
Right.
They dance around the main issue that is really, I think, is going to decide this new election, which is the genocide in Israel and how the fact that Biden has been financing, supporting Israel in the last 11 months with weapon and bomb 50,000. This is more than what happened in World War II. to the
Yeah.
Israel.
Yeah. It sounds like we're getting into the Vietnam numbers at this point, doesn't it? I mean, I don't know how many bombs we dropped on the North Vietnamese, but
But that
good
was how
grief.
many years?
Yeah, I was going to say that was like at least a decade. I'm forgetting my
Yeah.
math a little bit here, but
Kamala Harris, that's how we say her name now.
right.
Kamala, like Kama and La. They taught us, they teach us everything. Kamala, hers, try to the media spin that she's trying to distinguish or distance herself from Biden's policy in the Middle East. It was most that they allow the Israelis and a mother of a missing child, one of the hostages to speak. They didn't allow the Palestinian to speak. That mother, God bless her soul, I can't say anything about a missing son, but he's still alive.
Right. Yeah.
More than 50,000 Palestinians are dead. Some
Right.
say 180,000 if we at the end of the day. Nobody was allowed to speak at the Democratic National Convention.
Convention. Yeah.
And did she perform during those 5 days in her speech? And now she's doubled down on her support to Israel and keep saying has the right and all this crap. They've been hearing it for almost 80 years. Israel has the right to defend itself or herself. Well, every country has a right to defend itself,
Yeah.
but an occupier doesn't have the right to defend itself and defend the occupation. Take
Yeah.
us through the Democratic National Convention,
Convention. Yeah.
and been in almost a week now.
Sure. Okay. I want to actually step back and say a couple things first. Is that when you were opening up, when you were talking about the genocide that was being committed against the Palestinians, seems like just about everywhere in the world, except for in the United States, there's a recognition that genocide is going on. Remember, the International Court of Justice has said this, but if you look at the mainstream media in the United States, I mean, how often do you see the word International Court of Justice, genocide, Israel? It's not happening. Okay, so that's the first start. The second point is that when it was Biden versus Trump, we featured in our politics one candidate who was pro-Israel against another candidate who was pro-Israel. And now that we've replaced Biden with Harris, what we now have is one candidate who's pro-Israel versus another candidate who's pro-Israel. Do you see the difference? Do you see this?
I
Do you see?
don't see any difference.
Oh, you don't? Oh, don't. Okay.
I'm a second language English, second. So
Okay.
you might enlighten me on this.
Okay, so I have to steal your line. It's complicated. Okay, it's complicated. Okay. But at the convention, if you go by mainstream, by sort of mainstream analysis, the Democrats did a good job. What they wanted to do was to project like she said, the big happy tent, that they're all warm and fuzzy, that they're all in agreement, that the progressives and the moderates, everybody's in agreement. Alexander Cortez, AC even speaks and comes out in favor of Harris. And so everybody thinks coming out of the convention, Harris did a good job. Mainstream interpretation also, she did a competent job in terms of her speech. So she comes out of the convention looking like the party's behind her. Polls are suggesting roughly a week out or so from the convention that she's even with Trump, maybe ahead, maybe a little behind, but more or less like that. But what's lost in all this dialogue is what we're talking about today is is really nobody's talking about Israel and Palestine, even in their Palestinians, I should say, even in the supposedly big interview that she did with Waltz on CNN with Dana Bash. Not a lot of time was spent on Israel. In fact, help me out. I can't remember if any, or if there was, it was a nanosecond. So for the most part, even though she said, "Well, I'm 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 a little bit different than Biden," my microscope is not showing me as I'm looking hard here. I don't see any differences between her and Biden, and I think she prefers not to talk about the issue. And the mainstream media is basically ignoring and saying, the demonstrators who are outside the DNC, insignificant. There's really no opposition to her within a Democratic Party. That's the story. I'm going to call it. That's the New York Times story at this point. Is that she's got a united party, and it's just a fringe few people who care
There were
about.
more people outside than people inside.
Oh
People
yeah, oh
allowed
yeah,
in. Is there enough uncommitted voters that they are voting based on our policy with the genocide there in the last 11 months? Is this going to be a factor this time? Now they threaten us if you don't
sure,
vote for Kamala Harris, Trump will win. I don't care if Trump wins or not. I mean,
yeah, yeah,
as you said, they all the same shit.
yeah, yeah. It looks like right now the only state that might matter would be Michigan. Yeah, and I say that because remember that we elect the president of the United States by the Electoral College. There's really only about a half a dozen states that are truly in play at this point. And the one state that's in play is Michigan, which is a very important swing state. And there, if we go back to the Democratic primary, again, back when Biden was the candidate, if I remember correctly, it was about 20% of the people who voted in the Democratic primary essentially voted for uncommitted. And it was mostly because of the stance that the Biden administration had on Israel. That's the one state that could affect the election because Harris, if Harris wins Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, plus all her safe seats, she's president of the United States. I mean, she wins it outright. But if she were to lose Michigan, unless she can somehow pick up like a Georgia or something like that, she can't win the presidency. So it is possible. And that becomes the real interesting question now here is the focus really is on if we're thinking about one place where the Palestinian issue, Israel issue could matter and could affect the election, it's going to be the state of Michigan. The other swing states, the voters so overwhelmingly are going to vote for Harris. Does not appear to be enough people who care about the issue that are sympathetic to the Palestinians that it's going to affect the vote in those states.
Even with all this protest in campus and these young voters that they were disillusioned by the Democratic Party, the Ayatollah of the Democratic Party, they pushed Biden away and they brought the first African American women and all this bullshit. She's
Yeah,
still a coconut in a coconut club, brown from outside, white
right,
from inside. And I know this is not it sounds racist, but it's not racist. It's a thing. In England, they say it for the prime minister. But anyway, uh, isn't that an indicative this protest and it's still going on? The school is
right,
going to start or started this week. They still have encampment and they still protesting but that reflects it's all over the United States, in New York and California, in other states too. It doesn't matter if they are swing state or a red state or a blue state.
right, right. Well, this becomes the interesting question because I think you raise it really well here. On the one hand, and I see this with my students. I went back to school teaching this past week at Hamlin, and my students still care passionately about this issue. Hamlin University had encampments also, like many other schools in Minnesota and across the country. And one of the things that I'll be curious to see is to what extent, how extensive they are in the next few weeks and what coverage the mainstream media gives them also. Because last spring it got tremendous amount of coverage, and the reason and so far I'm not seeing the mainstream media cover this. And what universities have done since last spring is they've been sufficiently browbeaten at this point to where they're going to probably crack down on these encampments more because the claim will be the encampments are anti-Semitic, they're anti-Israel, et cetera, et cetera. So, so I don't think you're taking away the fact that young people care about this issue. Uh, do they still show up to vote, and how they vote was one question. But what we now look at is a fascinating dilemma, a dilemma or predicament that Harris is facing here, is that she needs the Jewish vote in many places to still win the election. On the other, and so she can't completely move over to support for the Palestinians. On the other hand, if she were to make almost any movement whatsoever in terms of sympathy for Palestine, on the Palestinians, a separate homeland, or criticizing Israel, she risks alienating the Jewish voters. And so she's stuck. And so I think her tactic right now is to hope to say as little as possible between now and November 5th. Just go silent on the issue.
Is this an automatic thing, so assuming the Jewish vote, the 5, 6 million, let's say 2 million of whom, whatever votes, automatically they vote based on our policy in Israel? There are so many disenfranchised young Jews too that they don't agree what Israelis are doing.
Yeah,
So they might also be siding with uncommitted, and they want to see a movement and ceasefire and whatever. So
right.
it's not really a done deal. You are pro-Palestinian or you talk about Palestinian
Exactly.
laws. So it's still Mercury there. We don't know what's going to happen in November. But
Yeah.
let's see what are the other myths that the last 11 months have really broken and exposed. The idea that we support Israel because it's our democracy, it's the Jewish vote, is APAC, and all this traditional mainstream New York Times narratives.
Right.
Is it really what's going on when in fact I look at it as the other way around. Actually, a lot of people say the Israelis and the lobby and AIPAC control American foreign policy or control American whatever electorate.
Mhm.
But I look at it as the other way around. And I think I remember 2007 when Netanyahu went to meet Bush, the aircraft carrier that were
Right.
there for a war on terrorism and all of that, and he was welcoming them, saying that Israel is the mighty American aircraft.
Mhm.
So we are supporting Israel because they are our agent in the Middle East. They are the one protecting our interests. They are the one who bomb nuclear in Iraq or Syria
Right.
and all of this. So we are using that idea of supporting the only democracy in the Middle East for our interests. It's a strategic decision more than just a Jewish only state and all this narrative that we've been hearing for almost 80 years.
Right. You make an incredibly good point. Now, there are political scientists, for example, like John Mearsheimer at the University of Chicago, who wants to make the traditional argument that says
The
that
lobby.
that the Jewish lobby controls the United States. I think we ought to think it the way you're suggesting it here. And let's think about it in if I can go back to the Cold War in Cold War terms, that during the Cold War, the United States and the Soviet Union had their like surrogate states. And those surrogate states would do the bidding or do the dirty work for the United States or the Soviet Union, so the two countries wouldn't, fight themselves directly. If taking your interpretation here, I think you're absolutely correct. Israel is the agent of the state agent of the United States in the Middle East, and we're propping them up. I'm going to forget the number of how many billions of dollars a year in terms of foreign aid we provide to Israel. I mean, we already talked about the 50,000 bombs. It's in the billion. It's in the billions in terms of foreign aid.
50,000 tons.
Oh, tons, tons. Okay, tons. Okay, tons. Okay, I stand corrected here. But we
No,
give
no,
them,
no. I mean, it's easy. It's an unbelievable number. That's why it's
yeah,
hard to.
yeah. But you're right. Is that Israel? If we withdrew support from Israel tomorrow, it would be unsustainable as a state. And the reason why I mention that is that we have actually tremendous amount of leverage over Israel in terms of what we could get it to do if we decided we wanted to act. But the answer is uh, we find it still in our interest. We find it in our political interest to support Israel, and it could be for a whole bunch of reasons. But at the end of the day, if we look at it as a surrogate state for the United States, I think it gives us a very different interpretation, as well as suggesting a potentially different solution or answer. I'm not sure what I'm looking for here for how to view what's going on. We could exercise the leverage if we chose to do so to get Israel to stop what it's doing.
And I think you're right. And I think the war now in Ukraine and the threat of Putin and Russia, when the United States sends 3, 4 major ships, they have 100 aircrafts on them and nuclear hits possibility. Those to find those few thousand Hamas, or those are made for a single or a message to Putin. And
Right.
those things have a long range, and it really using the Israelis conflicts, Palestinian conflict, it's not a conflict, genocide in the last whatever years, to kind of send messages to Russia. We are there. We're gonna protect whatever we're doing, and you cannot step the red line on all of this, because
That's
there
right.
is doesn't make any sense. You send all these major aircrafts to the Mediterranean to fight those people that are under the tunnel, and they've been depleted, and they are not factor. And unless you are still getting into the Cold War
Exactly. Yeah.
formula.
Right. Because think about it. For the Cold War, it would have been, well, let's call it Cold War Part Two or whatever it is at this
Yeah,
point.
yeah.
Is Israel is our agent? Syria, the United States perceives Syria and Iran as Russian agents,
Mhm.
and we basically support Israel as a way of creating what? What's the word? A buffer, a wall. I'm not sure what I'm looking for
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
to further our interests. At the same time, just think about how we're trying to play the politics out here. We're trying to play the politics both with Israel and with Saudi Arabia at the same time. If we're going to bring them in here, is that in many situations, one could make an argument on some areas of interest. Saudi Arabia and the United States shouldn't be allies. But the fact that they're trying to sort of create a broader alliance, Saudi Arabia and Israel and the United States, to oppose Russia, Iran, and Syria, that's the geopolitical arrangement that we need to be thinking about here. That again, if we go back to what I call the New York Times descriptions of it, that's being underscored how we've really are trying to sort of expand our scope of influence in the Middle East to counteract or counteract the perceived influence of Russia.
Okay. I know you're busy, and I know the election few months. I'm not gonna be here during the election. I'm just
Okay.
I'm getting it out there, so nobody
Okay.
nobody should look for me. Uh, you talked in your books, President Swing says it's about 150,000 people,
Right.
150,000 give and take votes that make the difference. Are you sticking to this number? Does it go up or down, or what it change? Should we take them for dinner, as you say, and try to talk to them
Yeah.
and save
Yeah.
this $30 billion an election, circus?
Yeah. I stick with the fact that it's about six states that are going to determine the election: Arizona, Georgia, uh, uh, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. Maybe you throw Nevada in, maybe you throw North Carolina in. So 6 to 8 states that are going to determine the election. What ultimately happens with how 150,000 to 200,000 voters, what they decide to do. Do they vote, not vote? Do they stay home on election day and eat bean dip? Whatever they're going to do, that's probably going to affect the election. But I can give you a really good prediction right now. Okay.
Go
My
ahead.
prediction is that the winner of the presidential election will be a candidate who supports Israel.
Whoa. Well, both of them do. So
Yes.
both of them not
Yes.
going to win. Somebody has to lose.
Yeah, so in fact, I'll even make it
Or
stronger. A strong supporter of Israel. See, I'm
hey,
going out on a limb and making my
no,
prediction
no,
here.
no. You've been right for many years. So that's not going to change. I thought we are going to see something different.
Yeah, and don't expect after the election, at least in the short term, even let's say, even if Harris gets elected, I don't expect we're going to see much movement, at least initially, if at all, by her in terms of people. Because some people are saying, well, after she gets selected, she's going to
Yeah.
move. She's going to change on the Palestinian issue. I don't see any of that unless I'm not very smart. Or do you see any indication that if she gets elected, she's going to move on this issue?
I remember when Bush, the son, in
Okay,
his first bet, all he said in Michigan that the Arabs have the rights or the Palestinians have the rights, and he got a lot of the Arab Muslim votes just
right.
for saying that. And people say things before the election that they do things differently after the election. We're not gonna make that mistake again. We did it with Obama. Change and then and all of a sudden ended up with
Yeah.
a political cross dresser, with the corporate America, I mean,
Right.
against the mainstream poor middle class.
Right.
But anyway, this is really interesting, and I'm sure 3 4 months to go makes a lot of things could happen, and but you're right. Looking at the history of election in this country, the support of Israel is strong, and yeah, and nobody ever lost an election by supporting Israel.
That's right. That's
It-
right.
it-
And
It's a sad reality. Electric in the biggest democracy in the world, India first.
yeah.
Uh, we can say things like that.
Yep. Yeah. Assuming, of course, we're a democracy.
Yeah, that's even another show.
That's
Well,
right.
Professor David Schultz, Professor of Political Science at Hamlin University, thank you so much. We always enjoy having you. Enjoy the rest of the day. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Talk to you later. See you later.
Thank
Bye.
you. See ya.